Welcome back, everybody. We're diving deep into a true crime story that raises a lot of really tough questions today.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll be exploring the case of Sarah Harris,
Hmm.
a young woman who had these huge ambitions, and her life took this tragic turn.
Right.
Our main source for this deep dive is an article from Investor.
Mhm.
It's called Unraveling the Sarah Harris Case, a tragic tale of ambition, trust, and loss.
Wow.
But the catch is, was her death a tragic accident, or was she actually victim of a system that failed to protect her?
It's a story that I think really gets you thinking about relationships and how complex they are,
Right.
and also like the potential for abuse of power.
Yeah.
And then you have these legal gray areas surrounding cases like this. It's fascinating.
Okay, so let's start with Sarah.
Yep.
She was smart, she was driven, and she was a former beauty pageant winner who
Oh.
was working towards becoming an anesthesiologist.
Oh, wow.
She won the Miss Maryland Petite pageant and graduated with honors from college.
She's going places.
Talk about ambition.
Yeah, ambitious for sure.
But then she met Dr. James Ryan
Okay.
during a routine wisdom teeth removal.
Oh, wow.
And that's where I feel like things took a turn.
Yeah, so Dr. Ryan, he is like this well-respected oral surgeon over 2 decades of experience. But their relationship, it like evolved from doctor-patient to employer-employee
Okay.
when he offered her a job at his clinic.
Mm-hmm.
But then it became romantic.
Oh, wow.
And that's where you get all these red flags.
That's a huge power imbalance, right?
Huge.
You have this seasoned professional, they're in a position of authority, they enter a relationship with someone that they recently treated as a patient and now employ.
Hmm.
It just seems like potential for exploitation.
For sure. You have to wonder if Sarah was truly able to consent in that situation.
Right.
I mean, even if everything seemed consensual on the surface, those imbalances make it really hard to know if genuine consent was even possible.
Yeah.
You know?
It's not like you have those don't date your student policies that universities have,
Right.
where the power dynamic is a bit more obvious.
Yeah.
This is more subtle.
Yeah, totally.
And it makes you think about all the different professions where this could even be an issue,
Oh, yeah.
like doctors, therapists, even bosses and their employees.
Mm-hmm.
The lines get blurry fast.
Really fast.
And to make matters even more complicated,
Okay.
Sarah eventually moved in with Dr. Ryan.
Oh, wow.
It seemed like a step towards a promising future, but their relationship was anything but stable.
Oh, no.
And then, in January of 2022, tragedy strikes.
Okay.
Dr. Ryan calls 911, reporting that Sarah is unresponsive.
Oh, my God.
And despite his attempts at CPR, she's pronounced dead at the scene.
Wow.
And they found medical paraphernalia like syringes and drug vials near her body.
Oh, wow.
And this is where the narrative splits.
Okay.
Dr. Ryan claims that Sarah struggled with drug use and mental health issues.
Right.
And he suggests that her death may have been an overdose, either accidental or intentional.
Mm.
However, Sarah's mother, Tina, she vehemently disagrees.
Oh, wow.
She believes that foul play was involved
Okay.
and accuses Dr. Ryan of being responsible for her death.
Mm.
It's a parent's worst nightmare.
Oh, it's awful.
And then comes the curveball.
Okay.
He's charged with depraved heart murder.
Oh, wow.
I'm guessing most of our listeners aren't really familiar with that legal term.
Yeah, it's not a common charge.
Right.
It's incredibly difficult to prove.
Yeah.
Depraved heart murder doesn't require intent to kill.
Okay.
It focuses on actions that demonstrate this reckless disregard for human life. Actions so reckless that they result in death.
So in this case, the prosecution is arguing that even if Dr. Ryan didn't intend to kill Sarah, his actions were so negligent that they directly led to her death.
Right.
They're pointing to a pattern of recklessness.
Yeah.
But what kind of evidence would support that?
Well, for starters, they'd be examining his access to the drugs
Right.
and how he handled them. Was he prescribing medication to Sarah outside of his area of expertise?
Interesting.
Were there any inconsistencies in his record keeping?
Okay.
Were the drugs even prescribed to Sarah in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
These are just a few of the questions the prosecution would need to answer.
And you can bet the defense will be working hard to counter those arguments,
Oh, for sure.
insisting on the idea of accidental death.
Right.
And maybe pointing to her alleged drug use and mental health struggles.
Exactly. This is where things get tricky.
Yeah.
It becomes like this battle of narratives,
Right.
of trying to piece together what really happened in those final moments of her life.
Right.
And it makes you wonder, what would it take to convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt?
Yeah.
What would be like that smoking gun in a case like this?
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's tough.
This whole situation kind of brings up this bigger issue that extends far beyond this one story.
Right.
Think about it in like a corporate setting where you have a high-level executive and they start dating someone, an
Yeah.
employee who reports to them.
Yeah.
Or when a therapist begins a romantic relationship with a client.
Right.
I mean, these scenarios often lead to really messy legal and ethical battles.
What would you consider red flags in a relationship like that?
Well, I think first I'd look at the timing of the relationship.
Oh, okay.
Did it begin while there was still a clear professional or therapeutic relationship in place?
Yeah.
Also, were there any promises made, implied or explicit,
Okay.
that tied the person's professional advancement or well-being to the romantic relationship?
Right.
That's a huge red flag for me.
So even if both parties claim everything was consensual,
Yeah.
there's always that shadow of doubt, that question of whether the power dynamic was leveraged even unintentionally.
Precisely. And the Sarah Harris case really highlights those potential dangers when those boundaries are blurred. Whether or not Dr. Ryan acted criminally,
Right.
the relationship itself raises serious ethical questions.
Yeah. You have to wonder, what's the role of medical boards in overseeing these types of relationships? Are there any clear guidelines in place to prevent potential exploitation?
There are some,
Yeah.
but they're often not as robust or as consistently enforced as they could be. Many medical boards have these codes of ethics
Okay.
that address professional boundaries and warn against dual relationships with patients.
Yeah.
But, these codes can be open to interpretation.
Right. So what needs to change?
Yeah.
Is it a matter of stricter regulations?
I think so.
Or is it about fostering a culture within the medical profession that prioritizes ethical conduct above all else?
It's probably a combination of both.
Okay.
You need these clear, unambiguous guidelines that
Right.
just lay it all out,
Right.
about professional conduct.
Yeah.
But you also need a system of accountability that ensures that those guidelines are actually enforced.
Right.
And maybe even more importantly, you need to cultivate a culture where these medical professionals actually feel comfortable raising concerns,
Yeah.
speaking up if they see something that doesn't seem right.
Because if those red flags are ignored or swept under the rug,
Yeah,
it's the patients that are ultimately put at risk.
exactly. And in Sarah's case,
Right.
we see how that risk can have devastating consequences. This case also sheds light on, the complexities of substance abuse
Right.
and mental health,
Yeah.
which are often intertwined with these power dynamics.
Right. We have Dr. Ryan's claims about her struggles, which are contradicted by her mother's account.
Right.
And it makes you wonder, was Sarah's potential vulnerability due to her alleged struggles exploited in some way?
That's a difficult question to answer.
Yeah.
We know that substance abuse and mental health issues can make individuals more susceptible to manipulation and coercion.
For sure.
And that's why it's crucial for professionals to be extra vigilant when those factors are present.
And sadly, these issues often go unnoticed until a tragedy like this occurs.
Yeah.
It makes you think about the importance of early intervention,
Yeah, for sure.
of providing resources and support to individuals before their struggles spiral out of control.
Absolutely.
And it also highlights the need for greater awareness and
Right.
understanding of these complex challenges, both within the medical community
Yeah.
and in society at large.
For sure.
We need to move away from stigma and judgment and create a culture where people feel comfortable seeking help
Yeah.
without fear of repercussions.
Exactly. It's about creating a safety net,
Right.
a system where individuals struggling with these issues can find the support they need without feeling ashamed or isolated.
And that support needs to extend to their loved ones as well.
Absolutely.
Families and friends often play a crucial role in encouraging individuals to seek help, but they might not always know how to approach the situation
Right.
or where to turn for resources.
Yeah, that's true.
This deep dive has been incredibly insightful,
Yeah.
and it definitely raises more questions than answers.
It does.
But I think that's the point, isn't it?
I think so.
To encourage us to think critically, to question assumptions, and to recognize that the search for truth and justice is often a complicated and nuanced journey.
Yeah, and this case is a perfect example of that.
Right.
It's a web of conflicting narratives,
Yeah.
unanswered questions,
Yeah.
and lingering doubts. It challenges us to consider the evidence,
Okay.
to weigh the arguments,
Yeah.
and to ultimately form our own conclusions based on what we know,
Right.
acknowledging that there might always be gaps in our understanding.
This case has really sparked my curiosity.
Oh, yeah.
I'm wondering if there are any similar cases, any legal precedents that might shed light on the depraved heart murder charge
Okay.
and how it's been applied in the past.
Okay.
Are there any examples where a doctor's actions or inactions have been deemed reckless enough to warrant this specific charge?
That's a great question, and it's one that legal scholars have debated for years.
Right.
There have been a handful of cases involving medical professionals
Okay.
where the depraved heart murder charge has been considered, but the outcomes have been varied.
Can you give us an example?
Very-
I'm really curious to understand how this charge has played out in real-life scenarios.
Absolutely. One case that comes to mind
Okay.
involves a physician who was accused of overprescribing opioids to patients,
Okay.
leading to several overdose deaths.
Oh, wow.
The prosecution argued that the physician's actions demonstrated a reckless disregard for human life, meeting the criteria for depraved heart murder.
So in that case, the physician's actions went beyond just like making a mistake or misjudging a dosage.
Right, exactly.
It was a pattern of behavior,
Yeah.
this disregard for the potential consequences that really elevated the charges to something much more serious.
Exactly, and that's the key distinction when it comes to depraved heart murder. It's not about negligence or incompetence. It's about recklessness that's so extreme
Yeah.
that it demonstrates this callous indifference to human life.
So it makes you wonder, in Sarah's case, what specific actions of Dr. Ryan's might the prosecution be focusing on?
Right.
What would they have to prove to convince a jury that his behavior reached that level of recklessness?
I think they'd probably be looking for a combination of factors.
Okay.
Did he provide Sarah with drugs that weren't even prescribed to her?
Interesting.
Did he ignore warning signs about her health or well-being?
Right.
Did he fail to take appropriate action when it became clear she was in distress? I mean, those are just a few examples of the kinds of actions that could be considered reckless.
And of course, the defense would counter that Sarah's death was either an accident or the result of her own choices,
Right.
potentially due to her alleged substance abuse struggles.
Exactly.
This is where things get really complex.
Yeah, for sure.
As a listener trying to sort through these conflicting narratives.
And determine what really happened.
Yeah.
Where would you even begin?
It's tough.
Yeah.
You'd have to carefully examine the evidence, weigh the credibility of the witnesses, consider the potential motivations of everyone involved.
Right.
And even then, there might not be a clear-cut answer.
It's a reminder that the justice system, while aiming for fairness,
Right.
is ultimately a human system
Yeah,
subject to the limitations of human perception and interpretation.
absolutely. Cases like this where the lines between truth and deception,
Right.
accident and intention are blurred,
Yeah.
they really challenge us to grapple with those limitations and to acknowledge the inherent uncertainties.
So let's switch gears for a moment.
Okay.
Let's put ourselves in the role of the jury.
Okay.
If you were tasked with determining Dr. Ryan's culpability, what would be the most important factors for you to consider? What would be the tipping point, the piece of evidence that would sway your decision? That's a great question. I think for me, it would come down to the medical evidence.
Okay.
Did Sarah die from an overdose? If so, were the drugs found at the scene prescribed to her?
Right.
Was there any indication that Dr. Ryan was providing her with medication outside his scope of practice?
Okay.
These are like the hard facts that I would want to understand before making a judgment.
And then beyond the medical evidence, you'd have to consider the power dynamics at play.
Right, exactly.
Was Sarah truly in a position to consent freely in this relationship?
Yeah.
Was there any evidence of coercion or manipulation?
Yeah, and you'd also want to look at his overall conduct.
Okay.
Were there any red flags in his past? Had there been any prior complaints or investigations related to his professional behavior?
Okay.
These are the kinds of details that could help to establish a pattern of recklessness.
As we're wrapping up this deep dive, I'm left with a sense of sadness for Sarah,
Yeah.
this young woman whose life was cut tragically short.
Yeah, it's really sad.
But I'm also left with a lot of questions. Right.
Was her death a tragic accident, or was there something more sinister at play? And that's the nature of these complex cases.
Right.
We might never have all the answers,
Mm-hmm.
but the process of asking questions,
Yeah.
examining the evidence, and considering different perspectives,
Right.
that's crucial.
Yeah.
It's how we learn, how we grow, and how we hopefully prevent similar tragedies from happening in the future.
Well said. And for our listeners, I encourage you to continue exploring this story.
Yeah. Definitely.
Read the full article from Ambassador, do
Mhm.
your own research, and form your own opinions.
Right.
This deep dive has only scratched the surface, and there's always more to uncover.
For sure.
And remember, every case has multiple layers, different perspectives, and often more questions than answers.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's up to each of us to engage with these complex issues, to think critically,
Mm.
and to keep searching for the truth.
That's right.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time, keep diving deep.